It was the middle of the night when the knock came, loud and firm. Like someone needed help. John sat up in his small bed, heart pounding. He didn't have neighbors this far out on the edge of the colony. No one ever came to visit him, especially not after dark. He grabbed his jacket and slowly walked to the door. The cold wind pushed against the walls as he opened it. Standing there was a girl, not older than 20. She was shivering in the dark, her silver hair wet from the cold rain. Her eyes were big, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. She stared at him, calm but tired, and then spoke clearly. "Hi, I'm the girl assigned to you by local authorities. Use me however you want." John froze. He blinked, thinking maybe he was still dreaming, but she didn't move, didn't even flinch. She stood straight, like a soldier reporting for duty. What did you just say?" he asked, confused. "I am your assigned companion, part of the relief program," she replied in a quiet voice. "My code is V117, but you can give me another name if you wish." John looked around, but there were no lights, no vehicles, no signs of anyone dropping her off. Only the empty field, the night sky, and her bare feet on the wet wooden porch. "This must be a mistake," he muttered, rubbing his face. "I didn't sign up for anything like this." She tilted her head, showing no emotion. "But your ID was selected, and you were approved. Do you reject the assignment?" she asked, her voice calm, almost robotic. John didn't know what to say. He looked at her again, thin arms, a short silver dress, and a small bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look dangerous, just tired. "Wet and lost. No, I mean, come inside, you'll catch a cold," he finally said. She nodded and stepped inside, her feet silent on the wooden floor. She stood in the center of the room like she was waiting for instructions. "Sit down," John said, pointing to the couch. She obeyed without hesitation, hands folded in her lap. He quickly made some tea and handed her a warm cup. She held it carefully, staring at the steam like it was something new to her. "What's your name?" he asked again. "V117, she said. "No, I mean, do you want a name?" She looked at him like she didn't understand the question. "No one ever asked me that before," she whispered. He thought for a moment, then said, "How about Violet? It matches your eyes." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I am Violet." John sat across from her, still trying to understand what was happening. "Who exactly sent you here?" he asked. "The local authorities, Colony Division 8, under Code 44B assignment program," she said without blinking. "Are you human?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then answered, "Mostly." That word sent a strange chill down his spine. She didn't act like a normal person. She followed every order, never smiled, never asked questions, and yet there was something deep behind those glowing eyes, something broken, something scared. He offered her a blanket, but she shook her head. "Assigned units are not to use resources unless permission is given." He sighed, walked over, and wrapped the blanket around her himself. She didn't move, but her hand slowly gripped the soft fabric, like it was precious. "You don't have to talk like that in my house," he said. "You're not a machine." She looked down and whispered, "That's not what they told me." Silence filled the room for a moment. Rain tapped against the windows. John leaned back in his chair, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't a hero, or a rebel, or anyone important. He was just a man living alone on a forgotten planet. And now this strange girl had arrived at his door with secrets she didn't even know she had. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was clear. This girl wasn't just part of some government program. She was a mystery. And John couldn't walk away from it. As he looked at her one last time that night, he noticed a faint mark behind her ear, a black barcode glowing softly under the skin. He didn't say anything, but he knew then. This wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of something bigger, and Violet. She was at the center of it all. John woke up before the sun, but she was already awake. She hadn't touched the bed, not even the blanket. Instead, she was sitting quietly on the floor, legs folded, staring at the wall like a statue left behind. After a storm, her glowing blue eyes didn't blink until he spoke. "You didn't sleep?" he asked softly. "I was not instructed to," she replied, still not looking at him. He didn't know whether to feel angry or sad. She was like a shadow shaped into a girl, always quiet, always waiting. John made breakfast, something warm and simple. He placed the food in front of her, and she looked down at it like she was analyzing a new machine. "You can eat," he said. "You don't need permission here." She picked up the spoon slowly, unsure, and took a small bite, then stopped and looked at him with something almost like surprise. "It tastes good," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a while, but John's mind was not quiet. He couldn't stop thinking about what she said last night. Assigned by authorities, used however he wanted, it didn't sit right with him, not at all. She had no memories of a home, no family, no laugh, no fear, no joy. She only had files uploaded thoughts, practiced words, and trained silence. But something was starting to crack, something under the surface, like the first ripple on still water. He went outside to work, fixing his old drone engine in the back shed. She followed without a word, standing perfectly still nearby. "You can help if you want," he said, not expecting much. She stepped forward, knelt down, and started taking the engine apart with inhuman speed. Wires, parts, chips her fingers moved like tools. He stared, amazed. "Where did you learn this?" "It was part of my function," she answered. "I was given base knowledge modules for mechanical assistance." Hours passed, and together they fixed things that would have taken him days alone. She didn't complain, didn't rest, didn't smile. But when she thought he wasn't watching, she ran her fingers along the side of the engine, like she enjoyed the way it felt. That night, as John made tea again, he found her standing near the old terminal in the corner. It hadn't worked in years, but she stared at it like it was something sacred. "What is that?" she asked, voice soft. "An old comms unit. Hasn't lit up since the storms fried the towers," he replied. She touched it gently, and the screen flickered for a second. It wasn't possible, but it happened. Later, when she thought he was asleep, she returned to it. She pressed her palm against the cracked surface, and suddenly lines of code appeared, symbols, numbers, words all flowing fast like they were being remembered, not typed. John opened his eyes silently and watched from the shadows. She wasn't just following orders, she was searching for something, or maybe someone. He stepped forward quietly, and she turned around wide-eyed, like a child caught sneaking sweets. "Who are you really, Violet?" he asked. She didn't speak at first, her mouth open, but no sound came. Then she said, slowly like it hurt, "I don't know." That night she stood outside, looking at the stars. John joined her, but she didn't speak again. He looked at her profile, silver hair glowing in the moonlight, and asked one last question. "Do you feel anything at all?" She didn't turn to him, but her voice came quiet and clear. "When I fixed the engine, I felt something strange." "What was it?" "I wanted to do it again." Something in John's chest ached at those words, because that wasn't programming. That was a spark, and in a world that tried to turn people into tools, a spark was the most dangerous thing of all. It was still dark when John heard the sound, a soft hum, almost like a whisper from a forgotten machine. He opened his eyes and saw light flickering under the basement door. But no one was supposed to be down there, not even her. He stood up, slowly, heart pounding as he moved toward the stairs. He opened the basement door and looked down. There she was, Violet, standing in front of the old computer system. It was something he had buried under junk years ago, but now it was alive again, glowing with strange blue lights and spinning lines of code. She didn't turn around when he stepped closer. Her hand hovered just above the screen. Not touching, not typing, but guiding it somehow. "You're not supposed to be down here," he said, voice tight. "I was drawn to the signal," she replied calmly, still not facing him. John walked down the steps carefully, the air around her warmer than usual. "Signal?" He asked. There's been no signal from the system in years. It activated when I connected earlier, she said, then turned to face him, and her eyes were brighter than ever before. I think it's a piece of my past. John stared at the screen, unfamiliar words flashing by, encrypted files, old military codes, symbols he didn't understand, but she seemed to recognize all of it, like a person hearing their own name whispered in the crowd. I wasn't meant to be assigned to you, she said suddenly. That sentence hit him harder than he expected. What do you mean? He asked, stepping closer. I was supposed to go to someone else. Someone rich, high-ranking, powerful, she said, her voice shaking now. But something happened, and I was rerouted, dumped here instead. John frowned. That doesn't make sense. She nodded slowly. I think it was on purpose. The files began revealing images, snapshots of other girls like her, sitting in rooms, standing silently next to older men, locked behind glass. He felt sick just looking at it. Is this what the program does? He whispered. They call it comfort service, she said, her voice small. But it's not comfort. And we're not meant to be happy. John stepped away, needing air. Violet followed him up the stairs. Her movements slower now, like the weight of memory was dragging her down. Outside, the morning light touched the edge of the field, but nothing felt warm. He looked at her, really looked at her, not just as a machine or an alien girl, but as someone caught between chains and choices. Do you want to stay here? He asked. She didn't answer at first, just looked at her hands. I don't know what I want, she said. I've never been allowed to want anything. John nodded, but inside his chest something twisted, the thought that she was sent here like cargo, expected to obey and smile. It burned a hole in him. Later that evening, she approached him on her own. I want to learn how to cook, she said suddenly. It surprised him more than anything, not because she asked, but because of the way she said it, curious, almost hopeful. He handed her a knife and vegetables. Showing her how to cut, she focused hard, tongue slightly out, trying not to mess up for the first time. She laughed just once, soft and unsure, but real. John froze, heart caught in his throat. That sound meant more than all the codes and files downstairs. It meant she was waking up, becoming more than what they made her. But deep in the basement, something else had awakened too, a blinking light on the corner of the screen. A signal had gone out. Someone knew where she was now, and they were coming. Asterisk. The knife slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a sharp clang. But it wasn't the sound that scared her. It was the faint, high-pitched tone in her ears. Like a silent alarm only she could hear. Violet dropped to her knees, gripping her head as if something inside her skull had just lit on fire. John rushed over, grabbing her shoulders. What's wrong? He asked, panicked. Her eyes were wide, glowing brighter than ever. Then she whispered through clenched teeth. They activated the tracker. His blood ran cold. He had hoped the program had forgotten her, that maybe she could live freely here. But he was wrong. The blinking signal on the old screen in the basement was not just an alert, it was a call. And now someone was answering. Violet stood up slowly, her body trembling but her face calm. I only have a little time before they arrive, she said. They will take me back, reset my memory, and assign me again. No, John said immediately, his voice hard. You're not going anywhere. She looked at him with something close to sorrow. I appreciate your kindness, but you don't understand what they are. He clenched his fists. Then help me understand. Violet walked to the corner of the room, pulled back the sleeve of her arm. There beneath the skin was a small line, almost invisible. With a quiet hiss, the skin split open like a hatch. Inside was a hidden compartment with a glowing red chip. This is the root command core, she said. It stores basic programming, orders, even memories. They let me keep. John stared at it, unsure if he was amazed or horrified. Can we destroy it? He asked. She shook her head. If we do, I lose everything, including the parts of me that are becoming real. He stepped back, heart heavy. Then what can we do? She took out the chip carefully, holding it between two fingers. "There's a hidden switch on this chip," she said, voice low. "If I press it, it sends one final ping to the system. And if we rewire the signal, maybe we can lead them somewhere else," John finished, catching her idea. Down in the basement, they worked fast. John connected the old comms unit to the chip while Violet sat still, eyes closed. Her skin glowed faintly in the blue light of the room. She began whispering words in a language he couldn't understand, soft, musical, and old. It didn't sound like programming anymore. It sounded like prayer. "I remember a place," she said suddenly. "A training camp, far away, hidden in the northern ridge. They'll think I ran there," John nodded, typing. "Fast, we'll bounce the signal from one tower to the next, draw them away." They finished just before dawn. And the chip blinked one last time, signal sent. Now they waited, that evening, as they sat by the fire. Violet picked up the spoon and tasted the soup she had made. Her hands weren't perfect, but the flavor was warm. She smiled faintly and looked at him. "I think I like cooking," she said. John smiled too, but his eyes were tired. "How much time do we have?" he asked. She looked outside, then whispered, "They'll be here by tomorrow night. Maybe sooner if they realize it's a trap." He stood up and went to the storage room, pulling out his old tools gear he hadn't used in years. "We're not going to just sit here and wait," he said. "If they come, we fight." Violet walked over to him slowly. "There's something else I didn't tell you," she said. "When they enhanced me, they left something dormant inside me, a fail-safe. In case I turned against the system." "What is it?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know," she whispered. "But if it wakes up, I won't be me anymore." The fire crackled behind them as silence filled the room. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the stars, something was coming closer. The first gunshot didn't come from outside, it came from the sky. A silent blue beam struck the field, leaving a smoking hole where nothing had stood before. John dropped the wrench in his hand. Eyes wide, Violet stood still, her head tilted, eyes glowing softly like she was listening to voices only she could hear. "They're scanning the house," she said quietly. "They know I'm still here." John ran to the window and saw the dark ship hovering low. No lights, no sound. Just a massive black shape floating above his land like a shadow that had come alive. He grabbed his gear, the old plasma cutter, a makeshift amp pulse, a signal jammer tools for survival. Not war, but this wasn't survival anymore. It was a rescue attempt. And they weren't trying to save her. They were trying to erase her. Violet touched her forehead, then her chest. Like something inside her was heating up. "I feel the trigger activating," she whispered. "They're waking up the failsafe." John grabbed her hand, rough and real. "Then we leave now." But she shook her head. "If I leave this place, the tracker reconnects. They'll see through the decoy." Her voice was still calm, but her breathing had changed faster, sharper, almost frightened. He had never seen her afraid before. Not truly. The back wall exploded. In a flash of blue fire, dust rained from the ceiling as armored figures stepped through the smoke. They weren't soldiers, at least not anymore. Their eyes were black and empty, and they moved like machines inside skin. Violet stood up straighter, shoulders back, face frozen in that perfect trained expression. Her voice changed, deeper, colder. "Unit V-117. Confirmed," she said. John stared at her confused, but she turned and whispered to him, "Don't believe anything I say next." One of the masked soldiers spoke. "Return for memory cleansing. Compliance initiated." Violet responded like a program reading a line. She walked toward them slowly, and John felt a sharp pain in his chest. Was she giving up, or was this another trick? As she passed the lead soldier, she turned too fast. She grabbed his weapon and twisted it upward, blasting a hole through the ceiling. Then she spun and kicked another square in the chest, sending him flying through the wall. "She's resisting," one of them shouted. But it was too late. John dove behind a table and triggered the EMP. Sparks exploded from the soldiers' helmets, wires snapping like metal nerves. Violet moved like a storm, graceful and wild, her hands crackling with stolen energy. They weren't trained for her anymore. She was no longer following the program. She was breaking it when the last soldier collapsed, twitching. The silence returned. But Violet didn't move. She stood frozen, her arms trembling, the glow in her veins pulsing faster. John stepped toward her carefully. "Violet?" he said gently. Her head turned, but her eyes were different now. The blue was fading, replaced by something red and deep and unfamiliar. "They activated the next layer," she whispered, then collapsed in his arms. He held her tightly, calling her name, but she didn't answer. Her skin burned hot, too hot for any normal body, and beneath her ribs, a light pulsed like a second heartbeat. He carried her into the storage room, wrapped her in blankets, tried to cool her down, but the truth hit him hard. She wasn't just fighting soldiers, she was fighting herself. A small folded paper slipped from her pocket. He opened it slowly and read the shaky words. "If I lose myself, please don't let them use me again." He stared at the paper, heart breaking, then looked at her, silent, glowing, and slipping away. He had only one night to find a way to bring her back, or lose her forever. The first thing she said when she woke up wasn't his name. It was a sequence of numbers, cold and sharp, like a lock opening from the inside. John froze, holding a damp cloth against her forehead. Her eyes were open, but the girl inside them was gone. Her voice was the voice of a system rebooting, not a person remembering. "Violet," he whispered, "can you hear me?" She blinked once, then again, but the warmth never returned to her gaze. "Primary directive detected. Security override in progress," she muttered. John backed away slowly, his mind racing. This wasn't a glitch. This was the fail-safe in full control. He had read about these systems once, in a discarded report someone left behind at a scrapyard. How deep programming in hybrids could rewrite identity, not erase the person, but trap him under layers of commands he didn't know. How long she had before the last part of her vanished completely. But he wasn't going to wait and find out. He rushed to the basement, to the unit still glowing from the false signal they sent. He plugged in the drive she hid in her arm, and there, among strange files and encrypted warnings, was a hidden message labeled only with one word, hope. The file opened into a small recording. It was her voice, soft and trembling, but it was her. "If you're seeing this, I've lost control," the voice said, "but I left a back door, a way in." She explained how the system could not be fought directly, but it could be tricked. Confused, reminded of feelings too human to be processed. "You have to show me something real," the voice continued. "Something no programming can fake." John stared at the screen, then turned and ran upstairs. Violet was now standing, her movements smooth but empty. She walked like a ghost programmed for war, and her hands sparked faintly with raw energy as if a weapon inside her was waking up. He stepped in front of her, heart pounding. "Violet, it's me," he said, but her eyes didn't blink. "Unit V117, target confirmed," she said, raising her hand. He didn't run, didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of cloth, her apron, the one she wore the night she learned how to cook. He held it up, shaking slightly. "You dropped this," he said, voice breaking. "You told me cooking made you feel something real." Her hand trembled in the air, sparks danced around her fingers. For a moment, it looked like she might strike, but then her lips moved, just slightly. "Soup," she whispered. The light in her chest flickered, and her knees buckled. John caught her before she hit the ground. Her breathing was fast and uneven. She clutched the cloth in her hand like it was a lifeline, and her eyes were wet, glowing again, but this time with tears. "I don't want to forget," she whispered. "I don't want to be erased." He held her close, not as a protector, not as a savior, but as a friend who refused to let her disappear. "I'll remind you every day," he whispered back, "even if I have to start over from the beginning." The storm outside had passed, but the battle inside her wasn't over. Violet had cracked through the programming, but the system would. Try again, and next time it might not be so gentle. John stood beside her all night, keeping watch as she slept, one hand holding hers, the other gripping the chip he had pulled from her body. He knew now that this wasn't just about saving one girl. It was about fighting a system that turned people into property, and tomorrow the world would learn that this assigned girl was no one's machine. She was choosing her own story, one memory at a time. The first time she stepped outside after the reset, the ground felt strange beneath her feet, like she had never truly walked before. The sun touched her face, and she blinked, confused. John stood beside her, silent, waiting. He didn't ask if she remembered him. He just handed her the apron, clean and folded like a memory wrapped in cotton. She looked at it for a long time, then slowly took it in her hands. "I don't know what this is," she said, voice flat, "but it makes my chest feel heavy." John nodded, the ache behind his smile hidden well. "That's what remembering feels like," he whispered. "The authorities didn't come again. Not after what happened with the last team. The system must have flagged her as unstable, defective, unprofitable. She was off the list now, free, but forgotten. And yet, forgetting was exactly what she refused to do. Each day she did something small. She stirred soup even though she didn't know the recipe. She planted flowers she couldn't name. She touched the wooden walls of the house like they were sacred, and every night, she sat beside John and asked a question. "What do I like?" He always answered gently, "You like music," or "You like fixing things," or "You laugh when the dog barks at shadows." And every time she nodded like she was trying to build herself from pieces. Because she was one evening, she brought out an old metal tray and set it down in front of him. Inside was the broken chip he had removed from her body. "I want to bury it," she said. "Not hide it, but end it." John dug the hole while she watched, and when the chip was gone, she placed a tiny wooden marker over it. No name, no code, no title, just a small hand-carved symbol of a flower. He didn't ask what it meant. She didn't explain. Some things belonged only to her now. As time passed, others began to arrive. People who had heard whispers, seen fragments of leaked files, other assigned units who escaped, half lost, half awake. They came with broken chips and bruised minds, but Violet welcomed each one with a warm blanket and a bowl of soup. They called her the first free one, not because she was the first to escape, but because she was the first to choose what came after. One night, while the stars burned bright above them, Violet sat with John on the roof. She leaned her head on his shoulder without asking if it was allowed, because now she didn't ask permission to feel. She just felt. "Do you think I'm real?" she asked softly. He turned to her, eyes kind and steady. "You're more real than anyone I've ever met." And she smiled, small and true, because she believed it too. No longer assigned, no longer owned. She was a person. She was Violet, and no system in the galaxy could take that away again.